and for maintaining the viability of life. So don't let anyone deceive you into thinking that there's virtue in powerlessness. And just as power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, powerlessness corrupts and also corrupts absolutely. A lot of the corruption that you see out on these streets, the shooting and the killing and the selling of drugs and so forth, the muggings, the stealings, the robberies, and all of this is a result of powerlessness. And powerlessness corrupting a people and corrupting a culture. Yes. Creating terror and horror in our communities. Because we are not able, we have not empowered ourselves to provide our young people with what? Jobs and alternatives to mugging, to robbing, to stealing, to terrorizing. Look at the difference between those, in terms of crime, between those groups who own property, who have a control over economic resources and so forth, who exercise political power and economic power in this society, and those of us who do not. And you can see immediately then that the power itself, powerlessness itself, becomes a source, therefore, of corruption. And therefore, if we are to change the nature of our system, we must change from powerlessness to power. And ultimately, though, social power comes out of the relationship among people and persons. Social power is, in essence, collective. We have to keep that in mind, because we normally think of individuals as powerful. But individuals gain their power from being backed up by a powerful group. That's right. Yes. Individual whites are not powerful. That's right. What power they possess or seem to possess is because they represent the power of their group. That's right. The individual cannot be separated from his or her group. That's right. In fact, the individual is a social creation to begin with. The individual cannot exist in a vacuum. You have a language that you share with millions of other people. You have attitudes, appetites, and all of these other things that are the result of your doing what? Living socially among another group of people. You have desires and so forth that have not only been generated from your social interaction with other people and living in a social system, but desires and wishes that can only be satisfied by that social system. You cannot satisfy them all by yourself at all. And yet we are deceived in this country talking about what? Individualism, as if all people can be an island unto themselves and yet meet their every need of other people. So ultimately, social power is in essence collective, and it involves two essentials: intentionality, by which we mean purpose and motive, and resources. When people have intentions, motives, and purpose, and they bring resources to bear in their situation to solve a particular problem. One of the things that we are dealing with then in this community, that we're dealing with in our volume on Blueprint for Black Power, is the fact that black people in America have tremendous resources. I talk about in this book the fact that we are a nation of people who are from 10 to 80% of the population of 117 of America's largest cities. We have 50 to 60 cities of which we are essentially about 50% of the population of those cities, above 100,000. We are the majority population in about 17 of those cities. And those cities are scattered across this country. They're connected by highways, roads of all type, railways, riverways, air routes, all types of things, all of the things necessary for a nation to function, we have available to us. fax machines, telephones, all of this we have as African people. And we have what? Money. W.E. Du Bois stated very clearly in The Dusk of Dawn that if black people could get only a fraction of their internal market, their influence on the economic and political life of themselves and America would be decisive. Now, when I first looked at that statement, I thought it was an exaggeration until I started analyzing the figures. And we started working with the figures. We're talking about a people who earn over $300 billion. Yes. But recognize, as I've told you before, the issue is not so much what you earn, but what? What you produce. Because you get paid only a fraction of what you produce. So if we're getting paid $300 billion, we must be producing well over $1 trillion or more dollars as a people. Yes. And yet we have a business section that only collects about $20 billion as African people. That means African people in America are spending over $300 billion, and the total receipt of black businesses amount only to $20 billion. But you see, I'm an optimist. I don't ask, is the glass half empty? I say it's what? It's half full. And I recognize that oaks from acorns grow. And I recognize then that that means that African people are spending less than 5 cents with black businesses. And that says then if we are spending less than 5 cents with black businesses and yet we are providing them with $20 billion, what if we spent 10 cents out of every consumer dollar? An additional 5 cents of spending out of each dollar as black people would amount to a total receipt and earnings by black businesses of approximately $60 billion. I didn't say 40 billion, I said 60 billion, because when you buy into a business, it uses the income also for what? Investment. Therefore, it multiplies what it takes in. So if we got you up to 15 cents out of a dollar, then we're headed well towards 75 billion. We've only asked you for 15 cents. You can give your 85 cents to the white boy. If we get you up to 20 cents and 25 cents, we got now black business past what? 100 billion and headed toward 150 billion. What would happen if we got you up to 30 cents? You can still give white folks what? 70 cents. You can feel happy. You can say, I'm multicultural. We don't even ask you to be black and African, you know. We're not asking you for your whole dollar. I'm telling nationalists now we have to change our language. Maybe we just say, look, just spend a dime. That's all. All we want to ask you to do is this. If you make $30,000 a year, pledge $3,000 to a black business. Okay? And if you do that, you're going to see black business transform itself overnight. Just with that. And we look at these other figures, ladies and gentlemen, you won't believe what possibilities we have as people. We have the talent, we have the skills, we have the whole thing, but we are missing the program. We're missing the leadership. We're missing the sense of purpose. And without the sense of purpose and with the resources, we are not going to be empowered. And the sense of mission is of key importance to bringing about power. And that sense of mission, though, has not been established by our leadership. And since it has not, it has placed us in danger. Let's look at this cry for leadership among our people, because our people see something here. 40 years after the United States Supreme Court outlawed segregation of the races in America's schools, supposedly in the interest of providing equal education through racial integration, the majority of black students find themselves in hyper-segregated urban ghetto schools, entrapped in an educational system that is in severe crisis and imminent danger of total collapse. We've had an experiment, ladies and gentlemen. The Supreme Court decision has been made. The busing has taken place. The surrounding of schools and shipping our students out has taken place. What is the condition of our people today? Hyper-segregated in the midst of in the midst of our urban ghettos. So the issue Du Bois raised early in this whole organizational career was what? What are you going to do about the people who are not in white schools? What are you going to do about the fact that the people are not integrated? Are they then to be made to sit around and wait for this great millennial era when all people shall be living together, black boys and white girls and all that other kind of stuff? Or must we see about the needs of our people right now? 40 years that the blacks in Montgomery, Alabama won the right to ride in the front of the bus, blacks in urban America are virtually the only ones, along with other forlorn minorities, riding the buses. I tell you, the white man gives you what you want with the vengeance. He tells you, you say you want to ride in the front? Good, I'll give you the whole bus. And so now you're the only one riding it. You got the front, the back, and the sides all to yourself. He's got his own express buses and other means of getting into the city. This is 40 years of, what is this now, 55? It's now near 95. So the issue of riding in front of the bus has not been solved in the way you thought it would be, did it? 30 years after gaining the right to vote, having benefited from the passage of the Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Act of 1964-65, blacks in urban America, you see, can vote for black politicians who cannot improve their plight, and can vote for the President of the United States. The only problem being that the big cities where blacks predominate are no longer important as the suburbs in electing the president.